Muhammad Fasih.
Now, but certainly, if we look at what has been explained now, and we go back to the core understanding of man. So man says that, well, I do this deed or I do this action, right? And that person did that, so they are responsible for that. That person did that, they're responsible for that. Now, we've explained in the past that the actions of man at every stage is on the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So no one can do good or do bad. No evil can be done to someone, nor good can be done to someone without the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because if that permission is not granted, it will not take effect because Allah is the Lord of everything, absolutely everything, not just people and animals and planets and solar system, but everything, absolutely everything. So then the question would be, um, because the study had mentioned before the program started that there was a certain group of people who felt that they were not responsible for the for anything bad that they had done because the act of the act was created, the doer and the deed was created, so therefore they have no responsibility in that sense. They are just following what is the natural law. How do we understand that, inshallah?
Okay, Muhammad Fasih, the group that we are talking about is called the Jabariya. Jabariya comes, the Arabic word comes from, the name comes from the word Jabr, compulsion. They believe that everything that happens in creation is the will of Allah, because nothing can happen if it is not Allah's will. And they were 100% correct in that. Now, if we say for something to happen, it needs the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The fact that Allah allows it to happen, does it mean, or let's just go back to how they believed first. So they believed that all their actions and anything that happens in creation is by the will of Allah, and nothing can go against the will of Allah. But they went one step further. They said, so does it mean that if I want to do something bad and Allah doesn't will for me to do the bad, that I will be able to do it? No. If I want to do good and Allah wills for me to do the good, then I will do the good. So I can do, they believe, whatever I want to. It doesn't matter because I can't go against the will of Allah. So as a consequence, this group a few centuries ago believed and came up with this philosophy that they are not responsible for their actions. They can actually do whatever they like. They're not going to be held accountable. And that is where they went wrong. The first part of their belief was 100% correct. We mustn't throw out the baby with the bathwater. The fact that nobody can act against the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But they took that to mean that they can now do whatever they please to do. And that is actually where they went wrong. Now, how do we correct that and come up with the correct approach to not eliminate the first part, which is correct, but try and remedy where they have gone wrong? How should we do it? Because many of us, in fact, fall in that trap by believing the way they believed without us even realizing it. Muhammad Fasih.
The voice of Bilisani Mani. This is the program Tawhid and the Creation, exploring the book The Essentials of Tawhid, book 3 in a series. And tonight we are looking once again at the topic of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala having created both good and bad. Time for us to take a break, inshallah. And when we come back, we will continue. Stay tuned. Okay. Bilisani, where do we go to from here?
So I think what we should do If we, because now we must ask now, as far as they are concerned, and we take the first part that nothing can be done against the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how should we understand our free will then? Do we really have free will? That is the question. And if we have will, how should we understand that we can't go against the will of Allah, but yet we are given choice?
Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and welcome back to the program Tawhid and the Creation, exploring the book The Essentials of Tawhid, book 3 in the series authored by Badasani Mani. This evening we're talking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala having created both good and bad. And before the break we spoke about the Jabariya, a group of people who developed this belief that because Allah created good and bad, Allah created the doer and the deed, that they found themselves not being responsible for the actions, because it was part of natural law that man could only do what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had set out for him to do according to them. Now, but certainly the other question that one might then pose is, we've mentioned that yes, Allah created the doer and the deed. How then does man become responsible for his actions? If we are using the argument of the Jabariya and trying to understand where they went wrong.
Muhammad Fasih, the question is really, do we have free will or not? Now, free will, as far as we as human beings are concerned, is what distinguishes us from the rest of creation. Right at the beginning of creation, before we were even born, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala assembled all of us in the form of our ruh. We didn't have human form then, we weren't born into the world yet. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala assembled all of us and presented us with this opportunity to accept free will and choice or not. It was offered to the rest of creation, everything from the mountains to the trees to the malaika to whoever else. Nobody wanted to accept it, because to be placed in a position where you have right on the one side and wrong on the other side and all the distractions that comes with it, and you have to always make the right choices, the rest of creation turned it down. They said no, they would be placed in such a situation that they didn't feel confident that they would be making the right choices all the time. But we as human beings, in the form of our ruh, accepted that. And the moment we accepted that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then gave us the ability to exercise choice. In other words, Allah said, I'm not going to force you as human beings to do anything, because everything else operates on the basis of force and compulsion. Whatever Allah has determined for them, they must just do that. There's no question, there's no choice. We as human beings were given the opportunity to choose. We're not forced to be good or forced to be bad, but we will be tested between good and bad. And that's why Allah created the bad possibilities and the good possibilities and made it known to us what it is that Allah would like us to do. So if we take it from that point, then yes, Allah gave us free will. Of course, our will is under the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nothing can go against the will of Allah. So does it mean that because Allah allows us to do it, that Allah is condoning what we are doing? No. Allah gave us the ability of choice, but Allah does not determine our choice. And here comes the thing of practical examples around us, where we see how people now take that in a everyday life example of how do they say, it's the will of Allah that I should do X or Y, so I'm just going to do it. And if Allah doesn't want me to do it, Allah would prevent me from doing it. So I think the question of whether we have free will, yes, we have free will, but our will cannot again go against the will of Allah. But Allah allows us to exercise our choices. That is what makes us different from everyone else in creation. So if we look at that, we must understand in exercising our choices, what comes with that is the need to account for every choice that we are making. So if we don't make the choices ourselves, then how can we be held accountable? So the fact that we are given choice comes with the responsibility of taking on the consequences of whatever our actions result in. Muhammad Fasih.
The voice of Bidasani Mani. This is the program Tawhid and the Creation, exploring the book, The Essentials of Tawhid. This evening, we're looking at the very important topic of how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created both good and bad. And in reflecting on that and trying to understand it a bit better, one of the things that we are explaining and trying to use as a method to more clearly picture this, get a picture of of what good and bad, or rather what the system at play is using the example of the Jabariya and their belief system, and how they declared that they are not responsible for any bad actions that they do because they're following the natural law. And yeah, but it's really clarifying that for us, saying that in actual fact, Allah gave us the ability to choose. We don't have the ability to do anything else, but we have the ability to choose, and then Allah grants us the permission to be able to do those things, grants the creation that we use to make to do the good or the bad. Allah grants permission to that, but ultimately, as individuals, we have command over our choices, whether we want to or disobey Allah, whether we want to obey Allah. That is at the core of everything. When we come back after this break, inshallah, we will continue. Stay tuned. Okay, Basari, when we come back now, which way do we
What
want to go?
what what would be great if you could say now, how do people actually go wrong when it comes to this concept? The example of wearing a mask or an umbrella when you go out into to the rain, or taking the necessary precautions, or even going to the doctor when you're sick and you say, no, if as my tyd uitgesit is, as my tyd uitgesit, I'm not going to see the doctor. There's so many different examples where we actually believe like the Jabariya without even realizing it. We don't take responsibility of making the right choices in terms of what is known as the correct thing to do. We say completely, no, it's up to Allah to determine.
Alif Samigam? Yeah? Alhamdulillah. Okay, no problem. Okay, thanks. Uh, okay. These robocalls, I don't know if Bidasari gets these robocalls with people constantly phoning as a message they send you, like, would you like to get 20
Oh, yes.
gigs of fiber? And it's a normal cell phone number so that rings, but one is not listed. So you pick it up, and then this person starts speaking on the other side. Uh,
So practical worldly examples, everyday examples of where we actually say we don't believe like that, but we act in the way we conduct our lives, we're actually doing it all the time.
khair, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome back to the program Tawheed and the Creation, exploring the book The Essentials of Tawheed, Book 3, in a series authored by Buddha Mani. This evening, we're looking at the concept that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created good and bad. That Allah created good and bad. And now, Buddha the other question that we can ask is, Certainly, the most extreme example is that of the Jabariya, the fact that they believe they're not responsible for any of their actions. But are there smaller ways wherein we as ordinary people employ the same kind of thinking without us even realizing that, uh, in disregarding the principle that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created good or bad, good and bad, and the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us the ability to choose?
Muhammad Fasih, it would probably take a few programs to quote all the examples of where we actually believe and live our lives according to the Jabariya, which is clearly a group that has gone astray. We can't say that our lives are determined by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we have no say in that. Allah made us responsible beings. We have to account for how we live our lives. That will determine where we end up one day. Now, the thing that struck me was I met someone and I asked him, where are you going? He says, no, I'm on my way to the supermarket. So I said, yeah, are you getting used to wearing the mask? So he said, no, I don't wear mask. Why must I wear mask? I believe in Allah. He's in fact saying exactly what the Jabariya is saying. If Allah wills that you will get infected by the coronavirus, then it will happen. If Allah doesn't will, and he takes no responsibility of making the correct decision. Or another example is a person, it's pouring out there, and you don't put on a raincoat or take with an umbrella to cover yourself against getting sick. You say, well, if Allah wants me to get sick, I will get sick. There's nothing I can do. So I'm not going to worry about it. You can, but you choose not to. You, in a sense, say, Allah will make the decision for me. You don't take the decision. Or even another example, the last example that I want to use is a person who is sick. He's very sick. He gets a pain across his chest. So it's a man. And the wife says, I think you better, must I get the doctor for you? And he says, no, if my time has been put out, my time has been put out. He chooses not to go to the doctor. But yet, all these laws have been put in place. Of if you are sick, you must go to the doctor. If it's raining, you put on a raincoat. If there's a coronavirus out there, take all the precautions, wash your hands, put on a mask, social distance, and all of those things. If you don't do it, you get sick. Can you say this was Allah's will? Clearly not. Clearly not. And I think we do it so often that we are actually going to get punished, because not only did we believe incorrectly, but our actions in the way that we conduct ourselves clearly illustrate that we now assigning our bad or incorrect deeds, we're assigning to Allah. We're saying Allah is going to do X or Y, but it's actually your wrong choice. Muhammad Fasih.
But essentially, to use an even more practical example, a man buys a brand new Lamborghini. We know how expensive Lamborghinis are. Buys a brand new Lamborghini, and he decides he's not going to lock the car because he believes that, as we've mentioned, certainly it's in the care and the protection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, as much as people will talk about the mosque or other scenarios and say they trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when it comes to something like that of the dunya, most people would carry that key around with them in a safe if they could because of the value of that car. So we sometimes are very selective in when we trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and when we take the precaution, so to speak. So it's not that we do it for everything. There's certain things that we are very careful and specific about. But the reality of that, from what I'm understanding, Bidasari is saying, is that we need to bring everything we do under the banner of first taking precaution and then trusting in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We know the advice of Rasul Sallam, tying your camel before you put your trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is
Beautiful
just
example. That's an absolutely beautiful and appropriate example of tying the camel. We all use it and we all say, tie your camel. But look how we live our lives, Muhammad Fasih.
and also Bidasari, an added dimension for the men out there. As much as we're talking about relationships and wanting to have a good relationship with your spouse and everything, husbands always have to remember those anniversaries and those special days and those birthdays and things like that, because if they don't, their wives will not be happy with them. I mean, certainly a man can make a lot of dua for a good relationship with his wife, and a wife can make a lot of good dua for a good relationship with the husband. But there's certain things that they need to do and so responsibilities that they need to meet to fulfill the obligation to their spouse to keep their spouse happy as well. So, I mean, if we understand that within the context of marriage, how is it that we don't understand it within the context of life as a whole?
Yes. Muhammad Fasih, um, it's so true what you are saying. The same person in the one instance will be absolutely clear. He must exercise choice and caution. He knows that. But the same person the person who doesn't want to wear a mask, if he goes overseas to Europe, for example, one of the European countries, and he goes into a restaurant, will he just go and buy anything to eat without questioning whether the food is halal or not? No, he will make extra sure that the food is halal, and if it is not halal, then he won't eat it. But that same person is now exercising the choice of either buying it and then saying, if Allah doesn't want me to eat haram food, then something will happen to prevent me from doing it, or the pork will change into a sheep or something absurd. That's how bad it can be if you use an extreme example. But the same person is saying, no, if it's Allah's will, then I will contract the coronavirus. And if it's not, then I will be kept safe. We mustn't be selective. We must keep our aqidah, our belief in Allah, and our understanding of tawhid. Because if we say that Allah is the one that will decide whether I do X or Y, you are in fact saying, I'm not taking responsibility for my actions. You are assigning all your bad deeds to Allah. Astaghfirullah. May Allah forgive us and protect us from thinking. That's how bad it can be. Without realizing, we are actually saying our bad deeds belongs to Allah and not to us. How can we be so wrong in our thinking when it comes to the aspects of Tawheed, Muhammad Fasih?
Subhanallah, Bidasani, I think just on all of that, what has become clear to us is that when we're speaking about things that we attribute directly to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then we don't take responsibility for our part that Allah has given us to play in it. But when it comes to anything worldly, anything where we derive direct benefit in terms of the dunya, then we are quick to take precaution. We are quick to do the things that we need to do to ensure that these things are safe. So, in a sense, man is lying to himself. He's lying to himself about where he is really positioned in terms of his faith by saying that, well, I trust fully in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But yet, trusting fully in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala means that he must also use the means that Allah put out there for him to ensure his safety, to ensure his protection. That part is that not part of the trust of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Is that not part of the package?
Exactly. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made certain laws very obvious to us what is right and what is wrong. And I'm not only talking about Allah having spelled out in the Quran and Sunnah for us the right and wrong, but generally speaking, the laws of nature, it's made clear for us. If you put your hand in the fire, it's going to burn. You know that. So do you put your hand in the fire and say, if Allah wills, my hand will burn. If Allah wills that it does not burn, it won't burn. If you're at a certain level, yes. If you're at a certain level, then the material laws don't have the same effect on you as it would have on the general population. But we are not there. We must carry out and do the things that is being spelled out by the Quran and Sunnah, and the general laws of nature must be followed. The general laws of nature must be followed. Otherwise, we're going to get punished. We're going to get punished for making the wrong decision. And the wrong decision is to say, I leave it in Allah's hands and I'm not going to take responsibility for my action. That's equally wrong. That's equally wrong.
Because, but it's sadly, just like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created the challenges and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created the outcomes, Allah's also created the precautions.
Yes.
For all of those things. A seatbelt is a precaution.
Yes.
A belt is a precaution that your pants is not going to fall off, or suspenders. These are practical things. We're taking precautions every single day for so many things, so many small things, for which we believe that we need to take these precautions. They are there in order to secure our lives in a certain way. So certainly, what Bidasad is saying is that you secure your life in a certain way, and then you leave the rest up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Yeah, there are two people, Muhammad Fasih, we use the seatbelt example. The seatbelt example. The one person doesn't want to put on the seatbelt, and so the next person number one and person number two. Person number one is just lazy. He doesn't like the effort to put on the seatbelt, but he doesn't make a mistake in his mind to say that whatever is going to happen is Allah's will. He doesn't do that. He's just a person who is committing a sin for not doing what is obviously right or wrong. He doesn't follow it. But the other person who actually goes to the extent and says, I'm not putting on my seatbelt because Allah will determine whether something is going to happen to me or not. Allah will determine. He actually abdicates his responsibility that he undertook right at the beginning. Right at the beginning, before he was born, he accepted the ability to choose, the right to choose. He's abdicating that responsibility, and now he sits back and he says, no, I'm not going to choose. Allah will determine for me. Whatever happens is Allah's will. And he does. That person falls in an entirely different category to the first person. The first person is just a lazy person who will get punished for his laziness, and the other person will be punished for believing incorrectly and assigning his bad behavior to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We must remember in whatever we are saying, Muhammad Fasih, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the ability to choose. And in our choices, whether we do right or wrong, the ability to commit the bad doesn't mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in fact doing bad on our behalf or giving us permission to do bad. Allah never gives you permission to do bad. Allah gives you permission to exercise your choice. And there's a big, big difference between exercising one's choice and giving permission to do the bad. Because Allah dislikes bad. It's made absolutely clear that Allah dislikes bad in the Quran and Sunnah, and Allah encourages us to do good and righteous deeds. So if Allah dislikes bad, how is it in fact even possible for us in our minds to consider that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could encourage or do bad? It's an unthinkable concept in our own minds. Bad, evil, wrong can never be associated with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it possible for us to do the bad or the evil if we prepare to take the consequences of that. Muhammad Fasih.
The voice of Bidasani Mani. This is the program Tawhid and the Creation, exploring the book, The Essentials of Tawhid, book 3 in the series, authored by Bidasani Mani. And if you'd like a copy of that particular book or any other books in the series of 6, you can visit www.salimani.co.za. But Asadi, I want to say a big shukran for joining us this evening, and subhanAllah, a very big topic and something that as we start to unpack, we discover there are so many dimensions and so many things that we need to be aware of. And we make Allah make us of those who are conscious, who live consciously and take the precautions that we need to take, and at the same time also recognize our role as the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in our own progression and in our own salvation as human beings. Obviously, that being trying to gain the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah. But Badasari, all the best. Shukran so much. Salams to Badasari and family. And please do stay safe. Amin.
Shukran, Muhammad Fasih. And Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to you and to the listeners out there. Shukran.
Afwan. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And from myself, Muhammad Fasih Peterson, till I speak to you again, inshallah, I bid you assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah and have a safe evening further. I mean, can we end that broadcast?